I remember a time where my grandparents would talk about the fright they had back then during the old days, fearing terrorist attacks going out into the public. They said they would always walk the streets in fear, not feeling safe when they would see Muslims, African Americans, Native Americans, and other races that weren't white. Talking about this made me realize how much this connects to the topic of the Red Scare. From this past talk with my grandparents, I could see in many ways how their experiences relate to the Red Scare of 1920 to the modern days. The Red Scare was a time in society where people were scared of communism, and it led to political persecution, singling out of individuals, and many more. This relates to my grandparents' story because they feared terrorists and terrorist attacks, as well as other races who were brought into the country. In our video, we will provide details about what the Red Scare was in the 1920s and how it changed society, and most importantly, the opinions of the society. We will also talk about how the Red Scare of 1920 still affects us today and how it will affect us in our future.
Back in 1917 to the 1920s is when the first Red Scare happened. This was towards the end of World War I, and it was fueled by a surge in activity amongst organized labor, as well as the anxiety which arose from the Russian Revolution. To get deeper into context about this topic, the Russian Revolution of 1917 consisted of Vladimir Lenin's Russian Party having overthrown the Russian monarchy and had proven the point that a well-known labor-led movement could easily and successfully take over the reins of the government. After this event happened, there was a conspiracy going around that Bolshevik would overthrow the United States, and that threw the American citizens into shock and paranoia. This ended up leading to a series of raids towards foreign-born people, accusing them of being communists. And these raids were called Palmer raids, which were very brutal and led to many arrests of foreign individuals.
One of the most significant modern-day issues that connects directly to the 1920s Red Scare were many U.S. citizens feared recent immigrants and descendants, especially the communists, will be the topic of the new Red Scare, which is China's new military and economic growth that is making the U.S. suspicious about the Chinese and resulting in the new Red Scare. There are also a lot of things going around about how the new Red Scare is reshaping Washington because of the fear of China's posting an existential threat. It's striking how much the Red Scare resembles the new Red Scare, whether it's in the United States' widespread fear of far-left movements or China's growth in their military and economy. The patterns are similar. I see the connection every day in school when there is discrimination towards students because of their race or culture. Someone's everyday life can reflect on how this legacy endures, as well as continues and carries on. A specific example that I can experience in my own personal life was when someone was being treated unfairly in my class and not being accepted into anyone's group because of their race, which they were African American. I could overhear other people making mean and rude comments about the individual. By learning from the Red Scare, we can better handle issues like racism, especially in our own lives. This is because the Red Scare gives us an idea of how people were mistreated and labeled as communists or other things just because they were foreigners or looked different from the rest of the Americans. If us individuals as a society together chose to not stand up and make this change, this will continue on and drag into our future, which will make us live back into the past.
This topic has influenced these things. Because what people do now is judge others and label them as things all because of their race and nationality, people cannot be together as one society. Because there will always be some people who will differentiate others and leave them out and make it such a big thing because they do not look at them the same as them. The long-term effects of the Red Scare's legacy still persists today. because we still see examples of racism and people being set out as different or just being treated and looked at differently in our daily lives. This could be experienced in the real world and especially all over social media. When I think about this topic, it just has me thinking about all the harshness and the rough times that happened during this. And I think that those were lessons for people to learn from, especially the government themselves, because they raided those who were foreigners, pretty much, even though they might have possibly been innocent.
My personal thoughts on the Red Scare is that I think, honestly, it was meant to happen. People did it out of fright and fear, and the government was focused on protecting our country.
I think that the Red Scare was pretty scary, especially for the foreigners. I could only imagine how they have felt.
Jaden here. I couldn't ever put myself in the shoes of those foreigners who were raided and who went through these experiences in general. But I don't think they deserve that. Right, Jandon?
I hope this doesn't ever take place again, but if it does, the government should only raid people they know are communists.
My name is Jandon, and who am I here with today?
Matthias Eno.
First question is, do you know what the Red Scare is?
Yes, sir.
Why do you think the Red Scare happened?
I think it's because the revolution in Russia, which led many to fear the immigrants.
Okay. Do you think it happened again do you think it will happen again in the future?
Yeah.
My name is Hayden. I'm a U.S. history student. Who am I here with today?
I'm Ms. Kanehiro. I am a U.S. history and world history teacher in the STEAM Academy.
All right, Ms. Kanehiro, do you know what the Red Scare is?
Yes, I do, because I teach history. It's a time period when Americans were extremely fearful of communists.
All right. Do you think the Red Scare is still prominent today? And if so, how is it?
I think there are different similar themes to how, in terms of like fear of foreigners, in terms of the Red Scare, right? People were scared of communists. Now people might be scared of like certain groups of people, like maybe like Muslims or like immigrants coming from the southern border up through America. So there are similar themes, it's just not completely the same. History repeats, but it's not the same, it rhymes.
All right, last question. Do you think the Red Scare right now is worse than it was in the 20s?
I think it's not as bad because like more people were executed because of fear of communists, and as I was talking with Hayden earlier today, Sacco and Vanzetti were accused of a crime and they were executed, and then people were put in jail for being scared of communists, okay, during the McCarthy era. So yeah, I think it was worse back then compared to now.
All right, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Overall, we have looked at how the Red Scare started and the reason for it all starting. We also went over how this had affected the lives of foreigners and how we can connect that to examples from the present days we now live in. This topic continues to shape the way everyone views the society and how people will continue to treat each other. You may think this topic is important to know. There's no point in learning this stuff and so much more. Take a second to look deep into the reason for all this. Foreigners were labeled because of an event that happened with the Russians and the American forces back in 1920. And in today's world, we see examples of labeling continuously being shown in our everyday life. Are you better off dead or alive? The Red Scare was a depressing and big time of fear, for fear was a big rise across the country. The Red Scare was a time when America had tried to defend themselves from communist attacks. This topic is important, and especially to today's society, because the connection between this topic and that active discrimination holds similar of judging and labeling.
Are you better off dead or alive? The Red Scare was a depressing and big time of fear because fear was rising across the country. The Red Scare was a time where Americans had to defend themselves against communist attacks. And this topic is important, especially in today's environment, because the connection between discrimination is really similar to judging and labeling.